on behalf of the Friends of the East Boston Greenway, we welcome you to this wonderful occasion, renaming of the East Boston Greenway to Mary Ellen Welch Greenway. On a personal note, I'd like to say Mary Ellen was my mentor and my best friend, and one of the things, if I had problems, community related, different things, I would call Mary and we'd talk about it. And one of the best things Mary did is she trained me to be a good facilitator for meetings, chairing meetings. Meetings should only last 1 hour. And Mary Ellen was great for that. And when I do chair meetings, I do try to do that. So that's remembering Mary. And I'm announcing this morning that the Mass Port Authority portion of the Greenway, which is beyond Porter Street up to Constitution Beach, will be renamed the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway. The signage will be installed in the early spring. Thank you to Marissa Wheeler, CEO of the Mass Port Authority, Tom Glynn, former CEO, Elena Capola, and Anthony Guerrero for making this happen. We would like to thank Mayor Walsh, Chris Cook, former Park Commissioner, Commissioner Ryan Woods, Adrian Madero, with the support of Joe Boncory and Lydia Edwards, helping to accomplish the naming of the Greenway today, renaming the Greenway. Yay. In addition, I'd like to thank the Friends of the East Boston Greenway Council, individuals who signed petitions, community organizations sending letters of support to the Parks Commission supporting the renaming. The Friends of the East Boston Greenway who assisted for planning this event today. Ryan Woods and his staff who have worked along with us to coordinate, accomplish our goal of having an enjoyable, successful celebration. And any other individuals or groups I may have missed. Adrian Madero, our state representative, has graciously accepted to be the master of ceremonies today. Everyone, Adrian Madero.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is such a special day, and it is such an honor to be with you all today as we celebrate the memory and legacy of a titan of community activism, Mary Ellen Welch. Today would not be possible without the incredible partnership of a number of individuals. I'd just like to recognize some of them now. First of all, my colleagues in office representing East Boston, our State Senator Joe Boncory, City Councilor Lydia Edwards, who will be here shortly. I have to say, when we first thought of this idea, the Friends of the Greenway, who deserve another round of applause, Karen and your team, thank you. When the Friends of the Greenway approached us with this idea, we started making phone calls to the city, to Massport, and everyone was immediately on board. Everyone thought this was a no-brainer and it was an appropriate tribute. And I remember when I reached out to then Commissioner Chris Cook and now Chief of Environment and Energy Chris Cook. Where are you, Chris? There he is, tucked away in the back. The first thing Chris said was, tell me, let's make this happen, where and when? And to have such willing partners in the city, we had the same reception when we called Anthony Guerrero, who's here representing Massport. They just wanted to roll up their sleeves and get this done. When you have such a reception from folks in government and stakeholders to want to move forward with an initiative that is so important to our community's history, it's always a pleasure to work with partners in government like that. And of course, Ryan Woods, our current Parks Commissioner, who helped get this over the goal line. Thank you, Ryan, as well. Mary Ellen's dedication to this community was unparalleled. For 45 years, she was a teacher at the O'Donnell Elementary School, molding the young minds of East Boston youth. A staunch environmental activist, Mary Ellen worked very hard to hold the airport accountable, being involved with groups like Air Inc., for example. She was always a fighter for those in need, and she became a founding member of the neighborhood of affordable housing because she believed everyone deserved the opportunity to stay in East Boston if they wanted to. She was a fighter for equality and social and economic justice for all, and a fighter to preserve our community's rich history. And of course, she was a founding member of the East Boston Greenway Council. And the special thing about Mary Ellen is that her effectiveness came from her ability to build consensus and collaborate with stakeholders. And this Greenway is a prime example of those efforts. Where many in the community saw a sea of park and flies and abandoned land, Mary Ellen, along with a group of committed community activists, many of whom are here today. I see Fred Salvucci as well. Thank you for being here, Fred. Valerie, thank you. They deserve a round of applause, folks, absolutely. Those activists saw the potential for a greenway that would connect one side of East Boston to the other. And this greenway took collaboration from an extraordinary amount of stakeholders. Massport, the city of Boston, the state and DCR and the MBTA, and of course, neighbors in the community here in East Boston. And building consensus among such a diverse group of stakeholders certainly was not easy. But people like Mary Ellen made it happen. Today, I believe we're the only community in Boston with a greenway that knits together both sides of our community, stretching from Pierce Park and the waterfront all the way to Constitution Beach. And it's become such a gem for our community. And I'm excited to share with you that with the partnership of Senator Boncory, Councilor Edwards, and others in this community, especially the Friends of the Greenway, we got an amendment in the state budget this year to extend our greenway even further, starting to get towards Winthrop. So we still have a lot of excitement left for this greenway, and there is more to come. In addition to her commitment to East Boston, Mary Ellen was also very dedicated to her family. And I do want to recognize some of Mary Ellen's family who are here. Thank you for joining us, those both near and far. While not related by blood, for my cousins and me, Mary Ellen was always Auntie Mary. She was there for us on holidays and life milestones, and was consistently there to encourage and support us in each and every endeavor. I remember when I had the opportunity to become a legislative aide for my predecessor, former Representative Carlo Basil. I was speaking to my parents and my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, Ariel. And the consensus was, Adrian, you need to call Auntie Mary and get her opinion on this. And so I did. And Auntie Mary encouraged me to go for it. And in 2015, at 26 years old, when I had the idea that I should run for state rep, I called Auntie Mary. And even though I thought it might be a crazy idea, she encouraged me. And she said, go for it, Adrian. Go for it. Throughout my life, Auntie Mary served as a guiding beacon of light. Whenever I had a policy idea or thought up a new initiative for our community, she would be one of my first phone calls. Her sage advice, her wisdom, her infectious laugh, her incredible, loving spirit are so sorely missed. And given the integral role Mary Ellen played in the creation of this East Boston Greenway, it is extremely fitting that we are here today to rename this beautiful park in her honor as the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway. I am honored to be with you all here today, and despite her reluctance to ever take credit for anything, and you know what I mean by that, she's probably shaking her finger at us right now, but no, in reality, I know Auntie Mary is smiling down upon us all today, because this is a special day. I love you, Auntie. Next up, we're going to hear from my aunt, Roberta Markey. And I think you're going to hear the story of how Mary Ellen became such an important member of our extended family here in East Boston. Please give it up for my aunt, Roberta Markey.
Good job, Adrian. Well, Adrian stole one of my main lines, which was the fact that Mary did actually shun any kind of awards or any recognition I'm seeing a lot of people here that I know and love. And so I was thinking to myself, but it'll be okay because we're going to have Irish music. And Mary will forgive anything to hear Irish music. She was always tuning into the Irish Hour on Saturdays, right, Eleanor? But since the music hasn't started yet, I'll let you wait for that. I want to tell you a little bit about Mary since the time I knew her. Of course, I met her before I really got to know her when she was working in charge of the Woodbury Pharmacy soda fountain. And she was very, very efficient, and she could control everything. And she would have arguments even then, well, discussions with her boss, the pharmacist, Vincent Scandura, who was not of the same liberal feelings as Mary had. He was convinced that Franklin Roosevelt really knew about the December 6th attack, or was it December 8th? The 7th. Got it wrong altogether. And that he was waiting until that happened so he could bring America fully into the war. But anyway, that just gives you an indication of the kind of person Mary was, and this was at the age of 16, 17. She was a born leader. Of course, she had the advantage of coming from a long line of very determined Irish women. Some would say stubborn Irish women. But I didn't know all of them, so I won't continue in that vein. Her great-grandmother, whom she would tell me about, had left home in the 1800s during the gold rush in California. And she went off by herself to make her fortune. Now, she returned, I don't know how long later, but you have to give somebody credit who had the daring to do such a thing. That meant she either had to sail all the way around South America and come up by California, by San Francisco, or she had to take a train ride. I don't even know if the trains all the way there existed at that time. But she did return to East Boston, and she returned with enough money to pay for the very lovely family home that still belongs to the family today, 212 Webster Street. She was an amazing woman, obviously, because she chose about the nicest area in East Boston at that time. And now again, it is the nicest area in East Boston, the most sought out, shall we say. Now, here I go. I need my notes. Anyway, I wanted to tell you about her grandmother. That was her great-grandmother. Her grandmother lived as the family matriarch in Mary's abode until she was 100 years old. She was the family matriarch, and she was a very wise woman that Mary well remembers and would talk about her often. And of course, Mary's mother, Eleanor Welch, she was quite a person herself. She graduated Emmanuel College, just as Mary would later, and she became a school teacher, just as Mary would later. And she taught piano lessons from her home, and she also played the church organ at masses. I remember her, and I remember visiting her as well. That gives you a little background on the women in Mary Ellen's family. Now, Mary valued and prided herself on her Irish heritage, but unlike a lot of other people with their heritages, Mary never failed to notice the heritage of any cultural group who came in to make their home in East Boston. She was appreciative of every culture, and she showed it by when she became a teacher, as her mother had been before her. And as Adrian said, she worked for many, many years as a second grade teacher in the Hugh Rowe O'Donnell School. She showed her appreciation and her goal of making every single child feel that they belonged to this community, no matter whether they came from Italy, which was, of course, the largest group of kids she had in the beginning of her teaching career, whether they were from Ireland, whether they came from Spanish background, Cambodian, Vietnamese, we got them all, East Boston being a port of entry. And for every group, and especially Afro-American children that we didn't have many of them till very lately, but she always, from the earliest days of her teaching, she would teach her children songs of every nation, very often in the languages of that nation. She would seek out these songs. Sometimes they were Negro spirituals. She taught the kids Kumbaya. She taught them Italian Christmas carols. She taught them Vietnamese carols. She taught them carols, Irish carols in Gaelic. How's that? And she really put effort into giving children in her classes the history of their community. She didn't think second graders were too young to learn about the Battle of Chelsea Creek that people hardly ever know about. From the Revolutionary War, it was our great victory, where the rebellious people, that's us, actually captured a British sloop that was armed, and they ransacked it, and they sunk it, they burned it, and it was a great victory. But because East Boston has often been the stepchild portion of the city of Boston, or maybe because we didn't lose that many people at all in that battle, you never heard a thing about it, in the history lessons. But Mary taught it to the children. She had them drawing pictures of the rebels and getting the ship, and they were posted all around. And I think that was a wonderful thing because it made the children have a point of reference of the place they were from. And I think all children benefit by that sort of thing. She also taught the children about the Freedom Riders, Rosa Parks, and how people of color and this is in the 50s and 60s, were not allowed to sit in the front of the bus. We all know that story. And Rosa Parks was the brave woman who did away with that by her actions. She agreed to get arrested and all of that. So I just want you to know that Mary was not the usual second grade teacher. She never thought those kids were too young to learn what was really important and how people needed to be able to voice their opinions and to have their ideals and to cherish their cultures. Now, I met Mary actually not when I was a little kid. I knew her from the pharmacy, I think I told you that, when she was in charge of the soda fountain. But I really didn't get to know her until I joined the Drum and Bugle Corps at the Assumption Church and the CYO at the same time. Now, the CYO had all kinds of activities, dances every Friday night, and prayer groups, and just took us skating and did wonderful things. And the Drum and Bugle Corps, we had all kinds of practices. The girls had to practice their steps. Mary was already, of course, being a leader and a star, as she always was. She was already the captain of the girls' drill team and color guard, and she was also one of the bigwigs at the CYO. Now, it turned out that Mary and I lived on the same street, Webster Street, so we often ended up accompanying each other home. We'd walk down Sumner Street, we'd turn up Cottage Street, chatting away, talking about so much. And as we got older, into our senior years, and Mary was a little ahead of me, she was already accepted at Emerson College, we had more and more to talk about because we had decisions to make about our lives, what were we going to do? Well, Mary was going to be a teacher. She always wanted that. And Mary, I didn't really know what she planned to do. I asked her, I said to her, Mary, I think I'm going to move out when I graduate and get a job and get married. I'm going to move out of East Boston because really, at that time, East Boston was kind of in a bad way. We had a lot of losses. Mayor Hines closed our beautiful library up on Jeffries Point, and that was a place that I loved. And when that happened, I think a lot of other people, and besides myself, were very upset because that was our place to go. We had heard sounds of the airport wanting to take Wood Island Park. Now, Wood Island Park, in that time, in the late 50s and early 60s, was really the only place in East Boston where you could go and breathe fresh air, see a lot of trees, make believe you were in the country. You could have your child play in the splash pool that there was there. There was a lovely big gymnasium. It was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and it was truly a beautiful park, and it was dedicated to the people of East Boston and called World War I Memorial Park in memory of the people who were slain in that war. And it was dedicated for all eternity. That's what the dedication said. And for many, many families in the 50s and 60s who had large numbers of children and lived in very small apartments, especially Italian families, that was the only place one could go on the weekends and really get all your family, you know, around you in the open space and use the barbecue pits and take your pasta pot and make pasta and really feel that you could enjoy one another's company. So anything that threatened Wood Island Park was a big cloud over the community. Massport had ceased being the novelty that it was when I was a little kid, when we would walk down to the airport and go up to the second level, to the rooftop, and watch the airplanes taking off and say goodbye to my father because he often flew out. Well, it wasn't that pleasant novelty anymore. It began to get very aggressive, especially under the term of Ed King, where there were great incursions into the community. Am I talking too long?
No, the sign fell down. I just picked.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can give me the hook.
You're good, Auntie. Keep going.
Okay. You know, because I knew Mary for over 50 years, so, and she was a very active woman, and I have to set the scene for her.
We're only on year 20 of that friendship.
So, Mary, who loved East Boston, as much as I think she loved her family and all of her friends, she was so dedicated, as Adrian always said. She was one of the first people to become an activist about all this stuff that was going on. The airport buying properties, convincing people they should sell their homes, and offering them money to get out so they could start to break up the community. And they really wanted to make all of East Boston the airport. There was even a joke when we got our skating rink, the Picaro rink, is it? Near the Orient Heights Beach. It was built to look like a hangar. And the word was that, yeah, they built it so that when they take over East Boston, it won't be hard to convert it. And that people really felt that. People, you know, I used to think to myself, is my house going to be under a runway someday? I mean, it was not a good feeling. And I hope that other people, it's not just me who felt that way, but people began to move out of East Boston around those times. They began to move in droves. They could see the handwriting on the wall. And between that and the fact that East Boston, the schools were very old, they were not probably of the highest quality. There was a lot of litter on the streets, as there still is a lot of litter on the streets. And many people just wanted to go someplace where they didn't have the smell of jet fuel to wake up to in the morning, as we in Jeffreys Point did. They didn't have the increasing noise pollution from the planes and air pollution from their fuel. It was beginning to get to be a terrible time for some people to try to decide whether they wanted to invest and live in this place that was having all these problems, and you might have to end up moving out anyway, or to go into these nice new little suburbs where single-family houses were being built with trees and lawns and better schools maybe, and clean air. So we were losing a lot of my classmates. When they got married, they moved out and felt that they were bettering the prospects for themselves and their families. Well, in the conversation, one of these conversations that Mary and I had as we walked up and down the streets of East Boston from our activities at the church, we decided we'd talk about what were we going to do in our lives. And as I told you, I told Mary, you know, I just think I'm going to move out of here. When I get a job, I'll work for a while, I'll get married, and I think I'm just going to go to the suburbs because things are not really great here right now. We had lost the opportunity for kids to fly kites, okay? Every kid should be able to fly kites. But no, that would interfere with the planes. This came about in the late 50s and the early 60s, because before that we could fly kites. We lost the opportunity to celebrate July 4th in our stadium, where we always, all the kids got together, they gave out free ice cream from the city, and we had our own little fireworks. And people loved it. And when they took that away, it was like, wow, we're not even Americans anymore? We weren't allowed. And why? Because it would interfere with airport traffic. So that was, all of that was part of my feeling. Well, Mary Ellen listened to what I had to say, and in her way, very sweetly, she said to me, well, I love East Boston, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to make it better. At that point, that's why you find me here today, I thought to myself, how selfish I am, how lazy I am. God, why didn't I ever think of that? Part of the reason was I never felt I would have anything, I could ever make a difference in the community. But I never really regretted the decision, because everything, I mean, this place we have today, this is like a garden spot. We have so many beautiful parks. Pierce Park, this park. We have the Orient Heights area, the beach that has been recently redone, and every single good initiative that ever took place in East Boston in the last 50 years was, if not initiated by Mary, it was certainly supported by Mary. She supported every good thing, financially, with generosity, of time and efforts. She was a leader, but a leader kind of behind the scenes. I think a lot of you will realize that she would write letters to newspapers. She would write letters to people in Congress, in Washington, in Massachusetts, and she would back very strongly our own representatives, senators, and city councilors. And she would always give them, and also senators, did I say that? Yes, I did. Didn't want to forget you. She would always whisper in their ears what was important in this community and what wasn't. Children were important. Nature was important. Pollution was important. We had to always be on guard against the incursions of Massport, even to this day, even though we have sort of a peace treaty and we have wonderful people who work for Massport. And I think Mary proved that she was fair and just in the fact that not only did she recognize people who were those who agreed with her, but she also had close relationships with people who were on the opposite team. She loved, oh, what was the name of the woman who I didn't think of it before this. She worked with Joey Cuzzy at Massport, and she came to all of our, Kathy Leonard. She loved Kathy Leonard. She loved Anthony Guerrero. She was very on very good terms with Tom Butler. Butler?
Glenn. Tom Glenn.
Oh, well, you know who he was. He was the director.
Glenn.
Tom Glenn, yes. And I think I'm at the point now where I'll forget everything else that I that I want to say.
You did a great job, Auntie.
But I want to. All of those people appreciated her friendship and her influence.
Great job, Auntie Roberta. And I hope that you all got a sense of Auntie Mary's values and sense of civic duty and participation through those stories, and they're so wonderful to hear. And I know I speak for many in the audience when I say I miss receiving those letters from Auntie Mary. Those were so very special, and I saved them to this day, and I cherish them. One thing I was reflecting on as I was standing to the side while my Auntie Roberta was speaking was, I'm looking at the crowd, and it's an amazing cross-section of people that have intersected with Mary Ellen's life over the years. You have old activists and new activists, old friends and new friends, family from near and far. It is just a beautiful crowd to be with you all here today. Thank you all so very much for coming to celebrate Mary Ellen. And one person that I saw sneak in recently, who Mary Ellen worked so very well with, despite oftentimes being on opposite sides of issues, is former CEO of Massport, Tom Glenn. And I know Tom would always say what an effective advocate Mary Ellen was, because like I said before, she brought people to the table. She just had this special way about her of cutting out any adversarial relationship and figuring out what are the common things that we can bond over and unite around. So Tom, thank you for being here. Next, we're going to hear from an individual who was on the front lines of many battles with Mary Ellen. I think you could say they were thick as thieves in some ways. Despite this gentleman not being from East Boston, over his career and life, he has been an incredible advocate and activist for our community, whether around issues of transportation or airport expansion or issues of environmental justice. Fred Salvucci has been in our corner forever. And we are a better community because of your service, Fred. And I know you and Mary Ellen had an incredibly special, close bond. And it's so wonderful to have you here today to say a few words. Please join me in welcoming Fred Salvucci.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And my wife, Mary Ann, said, "Now don't go on and on," which is good advice, which I'll ignore as usual. But it's great to see so many people. It's wonderful to hear Roberta talk about her long relationship with Mary Ellen. And she's painted, I think, a really good picture of some of the reasons we all love Mary Ellen so much. And I say that in the present tense because she's still with us. I saw Jack White here earlier. I think, where's John? Yeah, I think John is the person, I think Roberta is the person who's known Mary Ellen the second longest. John, I think, grew up with Mary Ellen since they were about 4 years old, so I just wanted to embarrass John because he's hiding back there. And he's always self-effacing. He's a great person, and he and Mary Ellen have had this relationship that actually started with their mothers being friends before they were even born. So, John, thanks for being here. I met Mary Ellen just about 50 years ago. Kevin White was mayor of Boston and started the Little City Hall program, and I got to be the first Little City Hall manager, and the city council had held up our budget, so we didn't have our glorious trailer in Merrick Square, which was the very elaborate office that we had. It was hiding someplace because the mayor's office didn't want the council to know that he had already bought the trailers. So there were about 2 months that I was marking time, going around, meeting people, getting to know the community better, because I really am from Brighton, and I didn't have relatives in East Boston. I wasn't particularly connected. So one of the places I went was to the APAC, to a meeting with John White was at the time the deputy director. Mary Ellen was on the board. Well, she ran up one side and down the other. Who the hell does Kevin White think he is? Send some jerk from Brighton he is. Not somebody from East Boston who can do this job. So that was my introduction to Mary Ellen. It's been an interesting relationship ever since, and she is a wonderful woman. I'll say a couple of things about her. One, Roberta's already talked about her pride in being Irish, and the non-exclusivity with which she approached her pride in being Irish. She would always give some zeppole to Joe Aiello when it was St. Joseph's Day. She would always recognize the other person's ethnicity and celebrate it. She was great with the kids in her class. And when busing began, and it wasn't popular at all, and Mel King called Mary Ellen and said, "We're worried there are a bunch of black kids that are going to be bused to the Adams School, and we're worried that there might be some roughness or they might get hurt." Mary Ellen was so good-hearted. She said, "Oh, we would never hurt children." Actually, there were some people who would have, but she gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. But Mary Ellen was there opening day to make sure that those kids felt welcome, and that, well, people didn't like the idea of busing. It didn't mean they didn't like them, that they're human beings, they had a right to be here, they were welcome. And it says a lot about Mary Ellen, I think, number one, that Mel King called Mary Ellen as someone he could trust to help. And then Mary Ellen responded by being there that day and many other days. As Roberta mentioned, she's on the board of NOAA. And I got to take a little bit of a walk, and I loved seeing the mural with the statement that East Boston has been a first home for many new Americans. And there's some great pictures in those murals of the different ethnic groups that call East Boston home. So that attribute of being proud, but including people in the pride and teaching kids to be proud of their background. The other thing she taught kids to do was to stand up for their rights. She would write the phone number of the Massport noise complaint number on the blackboard and say, if the planes are flying and you can't do your homework, call them or have your parents call. Stand up for your own rights. I mean, she was not, and you know, that's the way she was. But it was part of what she was educating people to do, to be proud, to stand up, and not get pushed around. So a really great person. She also had a lot of kindness. All of us, a lot of us, have had the privilege of receiving those cards with her handwritten notes. It's just amazing what it would do for you. And when Mary Ellen this past year was in the hospital, and Jimmy Aloisi would call to see how she was doing, or Joe Aiello, or Governor Dukakis, or Mike Capuano, or myself, her question was always, "How are you?" I mean, she was in very bad shape. And she was always worried about how you were doing. Just an amazingly kind person. Kind but tough. And she really could stand up. Now, I disagreed with her on tactics over the 50 years a lot. And I have to say, almost every time when the smoke cleared, Mary Ellen had been right. I was often arguing for a kind of a pragmatic approach, and we can get something, and let's not go overboard. And Mary Ellen would say, we're going to take a strong moral position. She had a huge amount of integrity. We're going to stand up for what's right. She was not embarrassed to lose. That was her real strength. She was willing to stand up and fight. And a lot of people, we all know East Boston, they'd sneer. Ah, yeah, you're never gonna be massport. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're silly. Well, you know, there's a huge change. You know, Mary Ellen was a force here long after Ed King was gone. And one of those occasions when I had a disagreement with Mary Ellen, and she was right, was when the Port Authority basically stole Neptune Road. The word was out that the Port Authority wanted to cut down all the elm trees on Neptune Road with some bogus argument that the trees were interfering with the radio waves of the localizer. So I'm a sort of a technical person, so we got a consultant. We proved that the localizer could work with the trees. It was all nonsense. We offered to have Monsignor Dewey, who's from the Star of the Sea Church and had been a pilot, offered to fly in the plane with the pilots, and if the localizer didn't work, he, with his credibility, would tell the community, I'm sorry, the trees have to go. But we knew that the trees were not a problem. So we're fighting this technical fight. One morning I get to the little city hall and Louisa Duarte says, Fred, you gotta get to Neptune right away. Mary Ellen just called me. They're cutting down the trees. That was city property. The Port Authority had no business being there. They weren't their trees, they were our trees. And they just went in, 36 trees, 36 chainsaws, bulldozers, picking up pieces of the sidewalk to create a barrier so that people couldn't tie themselves to the trees. The noise was incredible. All these chainsaws, these bulldozers, and people walking around crying. George DiLorenzo standing on the roof of the car, making a speech, God bless him. Drove his car into the state troopers, got arrested, made the front page of the paper. He did it very slowly. I mean, George had a crazy act, but he wasn't really crazy. He did it about a mile an hour. But it was awful. What they did, they invaded our space, they destroyed the street, and I looked around with Mary Ellen, I said, well, let's go back to the office. We've got to figure out a strategy. We've got to do it. She said, strategy? This is a tragedy. We have to stand here with the people of Neptune Road and mourn. Tomorrow's time for strategy. She was right. And next day, there was a protest meeting. We all talked strategy. None of them were very convincing. On the way out, Frank Mullen took his car keys out. He said, you know, I hear next Sunday's going to be a nice day. I'm going to drive down to Logan Airport, and I want to look carefully at the airport, very carefully. So I'm going to drive at about 2 miles an hour around the airport roadway. Who wants to meet me? And Mary Ellen was there. I forget how many cars, maybe hundreds of cars. People showed up, basically shut down the airport. Flights in California couldn't happen because the planes couldn't take off because no one could get to Logan Airport.
It was a slow-in.
It was to observe the airport carefully at a proper slope. In the front car was Father Celeste. So there was good support from the church. Monsignor Pitaro, I don't think was in the car, but he was in on it. And it sent a message that the port had crossed a line. And it seemed like a desperate act, but things began to change because people stood up and said, we're not going to take it anymore. And Mary Ellen, again, her power was the willingness to lose. Losing with dignity is better than not standing up for yourself. And it was wonderful knowing her all these years. I miss her terribly. But so I mentioned her pride, her integrity, her kindness, and her courage. I want to say 2 other things. One is that her strategy, if we call it a strategy, her approach to life really worked. This is a wonderful achievement that a lot of people here worked very hard to make happen. Mary Ellen was one of those people. But if you look around East Boston, and those of you who are almost as old as me will remember when Porzio Park was where Milano had his dump trucks and where Tringali had his boatyard. And we'll remember when there wasn't that nice walkway along the Jeffreys Point Cove. And we'll remember when the Port Authority had bought what's now the Belle Isle Marsh and was going to put, where there used to be a drive-in theater, it was going to put a bunch of oil tanks, just what we needed in East Boston, some oil tanks in the path of the runway just to make things more interesting. That was acquired, that was donated for $1 so it was sold for $1 by Dave Davis, the guy that replaced Ed King, to DCR, and it's now a waterway. East Boston has, as Roberta just said, standing and fighting to make it a better place really worked. You can look all around and you'll see right next door the elderly housing that Mary Ellen and Anna DeFranzo and Monsignor Pitaro fought for. There was going to be a Holiday Inn there, and in the end it's elderly housing because of Mary Ellen and the people that she inspired to stand up and fight. So these are physical things. They're important. They're evidence of her influence. But I think the bigger legacy is in the minds and hearts of those of us who knew her, and the minds and hearts of thousands of kids that were inspired to be proud of who they are and stand up for themselves. Just one other thing. I know I've gone on too long. I apologize, Marianne, but the I've been worried. I see a black cloud there, and any minute Mary Ellen is going to send a lightning strike down because she did not want to be recognized. She didn't want to wake. She didn't want a funeral. We all know that. So this, there's also another fellow here. There's Antonio DeMambro. Where are you? There's Antonio. So Antonio had this incredible plan that was supposed to be part of the Big Dig, but ended up not happening, like many things that were supposed to be part of the Big Dig. And Antonio's plan was to take this greenway idea and expand it so that the connecting ramps from the airport roadways that go through past Centapio's down to the Sumner and Callahan tunnels. That roadway was the first insult to East Boston. It ran, that used to be the pushcart market in East Boston. They cut the city in half. Those of you who know that neighborhood know that there are 2 Paris streets, 2 Liverpool streets, 2 London streets, because they were ripped in half by that. Antonio's vision was to broaden this greenway, put those ramps underground, and reconnect East Boston. It's something that inspired Mary Ellen. So Mary Ellen, this is a rally to organize support, to keep going. This isn't just to recognize it.
Thank you, Fred. That was wonderful. I think you could tell through these stories that Mary Ellen loved East Boston with all her heart. She was a fighter for our community. She was a fighter for equality and civil rights. And she was a strong and independent woman. And, you know, I saw a guest wearing a T-shirt that resonated with me. The T-shirt read, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." And what a perfect T-shirt to be wearing today in honor of Mary Ellen. And, you know, she instilled those values in her family, her sister Eleanor, her goddaughter, my cousin Rebecca Markey Linz. Strong, independent women. Mary just... She inspired people. She had such an amazing way. Another one of those strong, independent women, another one of those fighters, someone who was in the thick of things with Auntie Mary and so many other community activists to help deliver this greenway and so many other important projects for our neighborhood and our city, is Valerie Burns. And Valerie, I'm so happy to see you here today. And I want everyone to join me in welcoming Valerie Burns for some remarks.
water from viewing you because you're tiny.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Greenway, just to give you a sense of the place that Mary really worked so hard for in these last 30 years. And I'm kind of the newcomer. I've only been working about 30 years. So as people have given you a sense of Mary's life, we worked together since about 1990. And I don't think I ever met anyone who had more hope and more faith in what could be possible than Mary Ellen. And I never met anyone so strategic in trying to make that change. Weren't we lucky? In 1990, when a national foundation was looking for ideas for new parks in cities across the country, I think it was Karen that suggested that I talk to Mary Ellen about the idea of the old freight tracks that once served the piers. The idea that the tracks could connect the very new Piers Park, Constitution Beach, and Belle Isle Marsh in a green corridor was a big vision. Mary Ellen knew East Boston loves its parks, and still mourned parks that were lost. And she knew that this idea was not new. East Boston advocates had considered it for years, and now they would have resources if we could get funded. With a compelling group of support letters, and you've heard about Mary Ellen's letters, she wrote the best letters. We received the grant to start planning. We were on our way. For the idea to work, Mary Ellen knew that it needed a group of residents to lead the idea into City Hall, lead the idea into the state, and with Massport. A general invitation for people interested in the idea went out in East Boston. Mary Ellen called on her networks. That group, with meetings open to all, called the Greenway Council, came together in 1994, all volunteers, and is working still. In fact, they met last Thursday with Karen Madalena and Patty DeMori as Mary Ellen's successors. Year after year, Mary Ellen chaired the monthly council meetings, first attending herself, and then when she could no longer travel, from a speakerphone, commanding the room. Mary Ellen could really run a meeting, and I've learned so much from her. While some have been working for the Greenway since the first council meeting, many have joined as East Boston has grown and changed over the years. But I have to mention that not everyone who started with us is still on the journey with us. I think of Marty Coughlin and Rose DeMori as two people that were there at the very beginning. And now Mary Ellen has joined them. It was Mary Ellen who proposed a friends group be incorporated to permanently support the future Greenway. That was in 2000, before there was a Greenway. That is faith. That was Mary Ellen. With a terrific partner in Trust for Public Land, the unexpected donation of land from Conrail, and the leadership of the Boston Park Department, the first half mile where we are now was built. The ribbon was cut in 2002, and we incorporated a friends group in 2000. Showing the potential of continuing the Greenway as a walking and biking connection from across East Boston to the harbor. As the first section was being built, Mary Ellen, our strategist, knew that the key piece could fall into place with the third harbor tunnel, bringing the possibility of significant community benefit. By 2007, the Greenway extended through what's now Bremen Street Park, all built by the Big Dig and now owned and managed by Massport. And you all must know that if the Greenway made progress, it did because Mary Ellen was on the phone, writing notes, sending letters, working with elected officials and agency staff. She could be persuasive, smart, funny, and always charming. She was the Greenway's not-so-secret ingredient. The last piece of the Greenway in place now is the extension at the end of the edge of the airport past Wood Island Marsh to Constitution Beach. How Mary Ellen loved the challenge of this section, taking all her political skill, and with her very good partner in planning, Chris Markey. In addition to Massport and the city, this section involved the MBTA and a new group of neighbors. She was so delighted to be there in 2016 for the ribbon cutting, made possible with the kind assistance of a Massport golf cart. But Mary Ellen wasn't done, so we're not done. Absolutely not. The goal was to get to Belle Isle. How could we develop a plan to show the route, she asked. She was in the midst of thinking about that final leg when she was stopped almost in mid-sentence in March. If there's one thing Mary Ellen taught me on this almost 30-year journey, it's the power of saying thank you. We heard her thank each of the agency staff, elected officials, police officers, whoever would come to council meetings over the years. Her very effective comments at public meetings often began with a thank you to whoever was conducting the hearing. And her handwritten notes, which we've heard about, were legendary and treasured. So in her tradition, my thanks to all of you who have come here today, who believe in the Greenway, who attend meetings, who write letters, who make policy, who help to clean and plant, who introduce the Greenway to new people, and who work to make today's renaming possible. Now, I think of today, and we all know Mary Ellen, this would not have been her choice. I think of today as our collective thank you to Mary Ellen. And she understood thank yous, so I think she'll forgive us. Next spring, there'll be a living thank you here, right here on the Greenway, a memorial garden, right at the entrance, to have her welcoming us as people come to use the Greenway. So, thank you, Mary Ellen. You taught us so well.
Thank you, Valerie. That was beautiful. You know, Valerie referenced that towards the end when Mary Ellen became immobile, that she used to join all of these meetings by phone and by conference call. And I remember we were working with Tom Glynn and the Logan Impact Advisory Group on the last round of mitigation, and Mary Ellen firmly believed that East Boston deserved a senior center because we didn't have one. And I see Commissioner of Elderly Services Emily Shea here, who helped create that foundation with Auntie Mary and with so many of you here. And Commissioner, I look forward to working with you to get that over the goal line, also in Mary Ellen's spirit. Thank you for being here. And I'd also like to recognize Mary Ellen's brother, Jack Welch, who joined us. Thank you. We all know that Mary Ellen was Irish, and she was very proud of that. She was also Italian by association. But in her memory and in her honor, we have a couple of special things to share with you today. We have an Irish fiddler who has joined us, and we also have some Irish step dancing by the Woods School of Irish Dance. And I believe now they're, right, Karen?
Are they here?
Are they here?
Hello?
Well, I see the fiddler.
Well, Dan is here.
They're getting ready. Okay.
Do we want the mayor to speak?
While they get ready, why don't we have a wonderful partner in government, good friend to East Boston, who is another individual that when we called him and we gave him the idea about renaming this park after Mary Ellen, Mayor Walsh immediately said, let's get this done. Mayor, thank you for being here. Welcome to Mayor Marty Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. And to the family and friends of Mary Ellen, welcome and thank you for being here today. To Mary Ellen's brother, thank you for hiding yourself. Appreciate that. He's here as well. To our team at the Parks Department, Commissioner Ryan Woods, to the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association, to all the residents of East Boston, to the Friends of East Boston Greenway, to our local elected leaders, to our past leaders who led us in so many different ways, to the Irish step dancers coming up here in a minute, and the musician, thank you very much. You know, I come to a lot of naming dedication ceremonies as mayor, and before that as a state representative, and what I love the most is when we celebrate and remember our own. You know, oftentimes we put heroes and people we dedicate things after as a big figure, political figure, sports figure, and those are nice. But when we recognize a great Bostonian like Mary Ellen Welch, who loves her community with all her heart, that's really what makes our neighborhood so special. That's what makes this neighborhood here so special. As a teacher, as a mentor, as an activist, She made a big difference in so many people's lives, which is amazing. Her legacy certainly will live on in East Boston forever. Even if we didn't name this path after her, her memory would live on. But the fact that that's happening today, it's a reminder to the generations that are going to come after all of us here. Mary Ellen was a kind soul who made time for everyone. She lived her life with dignity and grace and humor. She stood up for what was right. Valerie talked about it. I know on my side of the city, when we were talking about doing the Ponce Greenway walk and the walks over in our area, those meetings always weren't open with open arms, welcome with open arms. There was always somebody in the room saying, how's it going to happen? What's it going to be? And it was a vision, and the vision wasn't going to happen immediately. It wasn't like you were planning a development where the funding was there and the financing was there and it was simple where you clear the site. Something like this takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of love and dedication by people in the community. She represented our best values for the city of Boston. Dedicating the Greenway to Mary Ellen is a perfect way to remember this local legend, and that's exactly what she is. She's a local legend. She wanted everyone, as Valerie mentioned, I heard Valerie talking here, wanted everyone, especially our kids, to have access to the parks, to green space, to our waterfront. She helped make the Greenway what it is today. We also honor Mary Ellen's legacy by supporting the causes she cared for, by protecting our environment, giving our kids more support in school all year long, building affordable housing, welcoming immigrants, building a more comprehensive, inclusive world. That's what we should be standing for today, and that's what she stood for. These are the things that Mary Ellen fought for all her life. She's certainly somebody that we should all hold up and want to emulate as a person, as an activist, as an elected official, and myself and Councilor Edwards and Senator Boncory and Adrian and all the elected officials. That's what we should be doing. We should be looking up and living up to what her values were and are. Mary Ellen's spirit will live here on the Greenway and throughout the neighborhood she loved. I want to thank everyone for all of you playing an active role in your community and helping honor this very special person in a very special way. When we think about heroes, we think about who our true heroes are, and there's many of them. Mary Ellen Welch is at the top of that list. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. How are we looking on those Irish step dancers? Are they ready? All right, so with that, I'd like to welcome up the Irish Fiddler and the Woods School of Irish Dance. That was incredible. Thank you to Dan Foster and the Wood School of Irish Dance. I know Auntie Mary's smiling down for that one. So I mentioned earlier that I partnered with Senator Boncory to deliver an amendment in this state budget that we just passed to the tune of $100,000 to start to lay the foundation for what Valerie was talking about. Right, the ultimate goal was always to get this greenway to Belle Isle Marsh. Well, with the budget amendment that we were able to secure, we're going to lay that foundation by getting the environmental and engineering analyses to get it from Constitution Beach to Belle Isle Marsh, and then hopefully even further to Winthrop and beyond. And that would not have been, yes, that is very exciting. But again, that would not have been possible without my partner at the State House, Senator Joe Boncory.
Thank you, Adrian, and what a beautiful day it is here today. Not just the weather, but the people we share it with, the stories we certainly shared it with, from Roberta and Valerie and Fred. You know, it's a wonderful legacy, and that's what we're here to celebrate today, is the legacy of Mary Ellen Welch. I've probably known Mary Ellen Welch the shortest amount of time in the room, so my speech may reflect that. But although I didn't know her growing up, I really saw her work growing up. I can remember coming into East Boston from Winthrop, usually waiting in traffic, getting over, you know, the ramp, and just seeing the thousands of cars and parking lots for Park and Flies, for Logan Airport. And so many of us probably just saw that's how it would always be. But then there were people like Mary Ellen Welch, who had the vision to see more, to see this greenway before it could be laid out, and envision what it would do for people and generations to come, and the community that she loves so much. And now to see what the greenway offers, and opportunities for biking and walking and gardening and picnicking, and a place for anybody from any socioeconomic background to really enjoy every day. It truly is a legacy. Now, Mary Ellen Welch, again, you know, she reached up to a lot of politicians throughout her career and whispered in their ears. And although I never had that, you know, real actual whisper, I did receive a couple notes from her when I took office in 2016. And they're memorable, and they're beautifully written in that wonderful handwriting she had. And she was always advocating. I know she was frail at that time in 2016, but she was always advocating. And not having met her, I remember going to an IAG, Impact Advisory Group, meeting at Logan, and I was a little late to the game, having just been elected, but I remember being in that room and hearing people advocate for projects, and we went around the table literally and heard from everyone, and kind of, you know, had it done. And then you heard a whisper and a faint voice, and I'm thinking to myself, what is that? And I realized that this voice was coming from a speaker on the table, and Mary Ellen Welch had called into the meeting. And, you know, she might have been frail at the beginning, but as she spoke on and spoke on, I wouldn't say she became louder, but she definitely and certainly became stronger. And as she was speaking, you could see the heads in the room start to nod, and generations of advocates that she truly raised were in that room. They were listening to her. And by the end of that meeting, she had the control of that room. And everyone was agreeing with Mary Ellen Welch and what should be seen in the menu of options to come out of, you know, that community benefit package from Massport. And it really is the legacy of her. It's what we celebrate here today, and seeing, you know, her legacy really goes beyond, you know, just this park. Her legacy goes to, you know, organizations like NOAA, and her legacy is whenever a family gets a house in this community through NOAA, that's her legacy. Her legacy extends to environmental, you know, advocacy from Belle Isle Marsh all the way up to here. And anytime anyone enjoys any park or any skating rink in East Boston, that is her legacy. And her legacy extends to seniors and her advocacy on their behalf. And whenever a senior gets a benefit from this city or state, that really is the legacy. But her true and best legacy is what I'm looking at here. Her legacy is a representative like Adrian Martiro and a family member. The families of the Linzes, the Markeys, the Caves, the Martiros, who are activists for years and generations to come in this community. That's really her true legacy. And I read when Mary Ellen Welch passed away back in March, many people wrote testimonials to her, and I guess she was often quoted. And, you know, one of the quotations she said was, you know, it's not the people that follow the elected leaders, it's the elected leaders that follow the people. You know, so I just want to thank you all and her family and extended family and her sister and her brother for sharing her with this community. And it sounds like you didn't really have a say in it, but she was going to do it no matter what it was. But really, on behalf of a grateful community, on behalf of a grateful city and state, I just want to say thank you, and I will follow you guys in her legacy for as long as I'm able. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Senator Boncory. We're also joined by one of our colleagues in government, at-large City Councilor Anissa Asabi George. Thank you for being here. And next up, you're going to hear from our district city councilor, Lydia Edwards. And, you know, I remember talking to my Auntie Mary when Lydia was first running. And Mary Ellen was thrilled at the prospect of Lydia becoming our city councilor. And despite the fact that she was no longer able to get out and be as active physically as she once was, I know she made a big impact in that race by making a lot of phone calls, by writing a lot of letters, and by supporting you from afar, Lydia. And I know that you and Mary Ellen shared a very special bond in a very quick timeline. And it is such a pleasure to have you here today and for you to carry on Mary Ellen's legacy as well. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming City Councilor Lydia Edwards.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to also acknowledge another colleague of mine, Councilor Flaherty, at-large city councilor, is here as well. This is a response, actually, to a letter. So I'm going to read part of a letter I was writing to Mary. Dear Mary, I wanted to reply to your last letter you sent me while I was a city councilor. I assumed you'd still be here, and that we could finally meet. We've spoken on the phone over the years. We've written letters to each other over the years. But I never got to hug you. You knew me before I knew me and what I could do. You saw East Boston in me and saw what this amazing neighborhood will be for generations before I could see it. I've learned so much from you, from Fred, from Joiello, from Roberta, from Karen, and I'm forever inspired. I tell you, Mary, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm a city councilor, and there's a lot on our plate here. There's a lot going on in East Boston. I sit and think about all of the things that are changing, and know that you were already part of those conversations. We have development, we have opioid issues. We're growing at a pace that seems so fast. The community's changing sometimes every month. Traffic, still a problem. Planes, still a problem. And so sometimes I go to sleep, try to go to sleep, and I have a headache. And the only thing I can do is ask myself, what would Mary do? What would she do? We continue to rally, we continue to organize, and we continue to move. But I can say for myself, at least, I haven't quite mastered that ability to deliver an uppercut with one hand, and then on to Massport, or to whoever, and then turn around and make sure she got the benefits for our community with the other. She was especially talented, not just behind the scenes, but on the phone and the letters and her ability to move people in ways that they didn't know that they could move. I'm not quite there yet. Me, Adrian, and Joe were working on it. When I got the call that you had passed, I took a moment, cried deeply, and then I called up your friend Mel King. Mel didn't speak for a while. He was devastated. He said, "Oh, thank you for letting me know. I'll miss her." We all miss you, Mary, because we felt safe when you were here. We knew Mary was on it. That's what it felt like. Mary's on it. Mary's there. Mary's on the phone. She's got this. That means we got this. But you reminded us all that the strength and power of East Boston is not in one person. It's in all of us. We are who we've been waiting for, and that's your legacy, Mary. For women, for immigrants, people of color, poor people, working class people, we were all inspired by Mary. And all Mary did was hold up a mirror to us so we could see ourselves and see our own power. This plaque is a mirror. This plaque is a history lesson. It's a reminder to stay vigilant to all of us in East Boston, to stay woke, as the kids say. I run regularly on this Greenway, and I will run faster and stronger every day on the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway because of those lessons, because of that mirror, because of that inspiration. P.S. Yes, Mary, I'm fully aware about the parking issue on Webster Street. I'm fully aware of how upset you are. Mary, you never held back. Even when you were telling me how good I was, you were also telling me where I needed improvement. I appreciate that. That's how people grow. So, Mary, I'll conclude, and I'll see you soon. In every child, in every community meeting, and in every fight to keep our blessed East Boston a true neighborhood. I'll see you soon, Mary. Yours truly, Liddy.
That was beautiful, Lydia. Thank you. And there's no doubt that Mary's spirit and legacy lives on through all of us here today. And as this program comes to a close, it's critical that we continue Mary's legacy of community activism by being engaged citizens. We must embrace our differences and celebrate what unites us, and that is our love for East Boston. We must love this community and always fight for a better East Boston, just as Mary did. Because through this work, we will always keep Mary Ellen's spirit and memory alive. I'm going to close the program with an Irish blessing. This is the blessing. Blessing, may the road rise up to meet you. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. God bless and love to Auntie Mary.